The shadow came on us, took over our lives. But somehow now's the time we must unite.
Be bold, be brave, be still. In the end we shall heal. Cause there's an answer, and together we will stand and fight. Lagen ordning dom ka klam kitap ka ni. Ya kan sharak jinker men nin kreman kasi.
Nhìn ya tết kỳ jing ya le but kỳ jing he. Ha jing du ai nhìn sa boy sha ka thong ka bangi pe.
We'll gather at the darkest hour, win this battle with faith and power. Long as we don't lose track of sight, together we shall see the light. No one can stop us, let's stay strong. The road to a better tomorrow won't be long. Katung ay buon chung chidel gen sal sawan chung am tel gen takrukam. Kuai mo. खुशियाँ ना होगी कोई पाबंदी मिलके रहना है हमको जैसे हो कोई family.
Okay, be bold and be brave and be strong and fight on, live on. It's not the end, it's a bend in the road. Let's move ahead, no stopping yet. Let's move ahead, let's not forget. Faith alone dries every tear, and when all hope seems lost, let's bow down in prayer. No matter who you believe in, there's no denying a blessing. Heal and recover, let's stand here united as one.
We will gather at the darkest hour, win this battle with faith and power. Long as we don't lose track of sight, together we shall see the light. No one can stop us, let's stay strong. The road to a better tomorrow won't be long.
Issued in public interest by National Health Mission Government of Meghalaya.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome each one of you to this public conversation themed COVID-19 Paving the Way to Recovery. This is an inclusive panel discussion on the safety and revival of the tourism industry in Meghalaya. This is the panel discussion brought to you by the National Health Mission Government of Meghalaya to consolidate public opinions around the areas of social recovery from the second wave of COVID. My name is Kit Shangpliang. I'm your host for this panel discussion. And yes, as the state opens up its tourist destinations, the questions are being asked by people. How safe are the people connected to the industry, and how safe is the tourist? Are existing protocols enough to shield us from COVID, or are protocols followed at all? So what about people who have not been vaccinated? How safe it is for them, and how safe are they for all of us? These are pertinent questions that need answers and directions. And we are so fortunate today to have the esteemed panel with us. And I assure you, you will get some of those answers today, this evening. Now let's get straight to introducing our panelists this evening. We have with us, as you would have seen, Mr. Lars Singh Sawian, Managing Director, Centerpoint Group Enterprise. Sawian is also known to many people as Ba Ming. We also have with us Mr. E.R. Solomon, General Secretary of Sora Region Tourism Association. He's a retired Indian Accounts and Audit Services, IAAS. Fortunate to have with us also Rothel Kongsid. He's the chairman of the Kong Thong Village Development Committee. And we have a lady with us as well, Mrs. Dasu Marlin Majau. She's the proprietor of Smoky Falls Mayfi Resort, and she has come a long way from Tirna. We also have a grassroots tourism stakeholder, and I'd like to welcome a friend, actually, Mr. Manbha Khongla. And if we are fortunate, later on, we might be joined in by Mr. Kishan Tibrewala. He is the chairman and managing director, Hotel Polotas. Yes, to all the panelists, we would like to extend a warm welcome to each of you. Thank you for your time. And we really look forward to hearing some solutions and some agenda setting for this panel discussion. I'd like to also inform the audience that this conversation will be in English and Khasi. for the simple reason to cater to our varied audience who are non-Khasi speaking tourists. They are also our key stakeholders. And yes, the local hosts who are in Pan Meghalaya. So, without any further ado, I'd like to start asking these questions to our panelists, starting with Ba Ming. Uh, Ba Ming, uh, in 2020, we have seen how the first wave had impacted life, not just tourism, but life itself. So the question that we'd like to ask you, what have we learned from 2020 to tell us that we are better off this time? Or are we better off at all? So just give us a Meghalaya tourism reality and the challenges to set the context for this panel discussion. Baming.
Yes, yes, Kit. So it's been a very, very difficult 18 months for humanity as a whole, and especially here in Meghalaya, where a significant number of people are dependent on tourism as a means of livelihood. Uh, Ever since the pandemic started in India in March 2020, I think the entire year virtually was a total shutdown for us, and it was only towards the end of December that things started easing, and we were again open for tourism, and government had kind of relaxed the restrictions for entry and allowed tourism properties to open. So after being shut for almost 9 months, there was a bit of a respite towards the end of December, and going into January, February, almost an entire March of 2021, we had started seeing some sort of a recovery. In fact, by March, I would say we were almost at 80% of what normal tourism that we normally receive, even in Meghalaya. Unfortunately, then came the second pandemic and the second wave, which really, really hit all of us really, really hard. So I think the learnings really, Kit, is obviously that we need to be careful. We have to learn from the fact that things did ease out after the first wave, and things were largely normal by the time we hit March last year, till we saw the unfortunate second wave set in. Now, we've been told by many over the last couple of months that there are chances and possibilities of a third wave. And keeping that in mind, and the fact that this is a pandemic never seen before since the Spanish wave, I think we've all got to be a little careful in the way we go about it. I think government knows best. So whatever protocols and SOPs that are set up by the government, I think every stakeholder needs to really adhere to it. I mean, there'll be times when we feel that things are easing out and we might start relaxing, easing out on, the masks, the washing of hands, the various protocols that are generally been set in. But I feel that we should not take this lightly, and definitely for the next 6 months to 12 months, whatever protocols that are set in by the government, we got to adhere to it. I think this is what has happened. I've traveled in the last 3 months to Delhi, and I've noticed that despite the fact that, in fact, timings there are much more relaxed than what it is in Shillong. In fact, the first time I went to Delhi in July, restaurants and hotels and bars and shops were open till 10 p.m. But one thing that the government did there was they ensured that anyone out in public had their masks on. And even in the hotels, there were very clear-cut SOPs. One could not walk around in public areas without masks. It was only in your own rooms that you could where you could take off your mask and relax, and of course while dining. But the moment you move out of that table, one had to have your mask on, and this is something that has happened since about July end when I last visited Delhi. And to think of what we saw in April, it was quite amazing for me, because when I came back, when coming from Shillong, I was like quite shocked, in fact, because Shillong, we were still in the middle of a virtual lockdown, whereas Delhi was already open, and we are sitting in October now. And here restrictions are still on, and things are quite normal there. So yes, so that is one thing. Adhering to protocols and SOPs, being careful, to be on guard. We don't know what can come in next, but at the same time, we have to be optimistic. So I think we have to look into everything with an element of cautious optimism. We've got to be optimistic that the tourism industry is going to see a rebound, and post the pandemic, destinations like Meghalaya are definitely going to see a greater number of traction and footfall. So that is the optimistic part of things. But the caution that we've got to all put is that the more people come in means the more chances of infections and
Yes.
the virus kind of spreading, because
Yes.
at the end of the day it's still very much prevalent, though
Yes. Yes.
having subsided. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Baming. Very, very valid points. And the words really is, protection, protocols, life must go on, and cautious optimism. Those are the words that you've really put the message across. I would like to bring Solomon at this point. He comes from Sora. Uh, but Solomon, Sora is a known tourist destination, and you would have received, after the lockdown and the second wave, you would have received some tourists. And if you can share with us, the community involvement in ensuring safe and secure tourism. This could be in the form of a gap analysis as well, because I think the people around Meghalaya, when it comes to tourism, they do look up to Sora as the natural leader in tourism. So, Solomon, please take your time. Thank you.
Yeah, with the opening up of tourism once again from the 1st of September, there has been the floodgates have been opened to tourists from across the country, and therefore it is important that great care should be taken by one and all, especially the stakeholders and the role players in the tourism industry. Just to set you on a perspective, on the 21st of July, the total number of people who above 45 years who were vaccinated were only 39%. And out of those 39%, only 6.44% of these people above 45 years had taken both their doses. For the population between 18 years up to 45 years, only 22.84% of this population had taken their first dose of the vaccination. Since the 21st of July 2021, the number of vaccinations have increased tremendously under the Shela Bolaganj CRD block. Now, this is essentially the focus is on the Shela Bolaganj CRD block, because that is where most of the tourist spots and destinations are located. You could count them all. They spread around from Nongriat to Kalikai Falls, to Arwa Caves, to Mausmai Caves, to the Sithiang Falls, to the Kindrim Falls, down further to Lajyam and Ringot, places of interest and for people to visit. What has happened is that since 21st of July 2021, the number of vaccinations of people who have been vaccinated amongst the general population, not only the people who run the tourism industry or are stakeholders in the tourism industry, but the general population of people who have been vaccinated have increased. And this is because essentially of the advocacy of the Sirdars, the Rangbashnongs, the local darbars in the various places in the Shela Bolaganj CRD block. For example, in Mausmai, I spoke to the Sirdar last evening, and he informs me that the total number of people who have been vaccinated as on date is more than 80%. Now, this is a fantastic achievement.
Mhm.
I spoke to another gentleman at Nongria, which has a total population of about 140 to 150 persons. And he tells me that essentially there only about 40 people have been vaccinated. The problem, he tells me, is that essentially the interface is the difficulty of people from Nongriat moving up to Tirna to take the vaccinations. Perhaps if the vaccinators could get down to Nongriat, the total population could be vaccinated at one go. That would not be a difficulty. Added to this, in the Sora region, under the Sora CHC, the census town in Sora, the population of people who have been vaccinated has increased slightly, but there has been a lot of people who have questioned the efficacy of the vaccine. Now, this is something that we have to essentially work with from day to day, especially in the light of various judgments of the various courts and the Supreme Court, which says that vaccinations for COVID can only be done on a voluntary basis. But then we know that unless we do take the vaccinations, we essentially cannot protect ourselves and cannot develop an immune system. So therefore, I feel that the advocacy is important, not only for us as tourism stakeholders, but also to spread the word around. The government has issued permissions for the hotels, for the homestays, for the restaurants, for the shops, and has allowed only those people who have been vaccinated to essentially open the establishments, and also the people working under them. That has also been a step which is positive, because from these employees of ours that have been vaccinated, they advocate essentially for their relatives to come forward for vaccinations. Therefore,
Yes.
I see that the rate of vaccinations should essentially improve with time, despite the various arguments put forth by various other organizations against the efficacy of the vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Solomon. I think you're a man of numbers. You've given us all those statistics, and which is very, very helpful. But after your comments there and your views, I think it's timely to bring a person from the grassroots level. Ngisngo don bok shibun bangi don lang bat ngi hang ni barotel kuble shibun nam da ko podong pi tiwa barotel ngan poi be thik shaka ni ka jingli habangi pet ikithan nong gondong pi wan na khat arsnong na kong thong na ki than chito katika bat kakam jungo kai perthei ba habangi ekren te yatho khandia ngi ki jinglong jingman ki than kamtam mi lai asngo ya ba Solomon ida kado kumto ki than khat arsnong yatho khandiat shwa ya ka kata shnong kong thong namar resident na pen jongi ki pampat yo sngo tenrei pen kan lengkot dita yatho khandiat ya ka kamai ka ji bat kumno ka jingim ka bai dai bat kani ka jingim kala kala namata kani namar ba kan ka kani ka khlam ka dan bat ni te ladapi ladapi pet bahaya ki than kong thong hiru hot kong thong ki shak tu ko bai ka dan ka wa ken nang ta ki no wet ba kum ta ter shakadiang bat shakamon jong pi tingi ko shisha mani sngo na pi barotel shemini por
kuble ye pi baro tikalong ka ek bas kutunat ka bangin yo panya samlang ye penta kasno kong thong jungi kadon po ka blok kharasnong laikro sena di blok jongka east kasis district ka bhaba po kasora subdivision but kadijingai tong kasnong kong thong na slong galong kumasan pang 2 kilometer kiba bu pra snong jongi bat baro ai ide kiba im hakarep hakaryang ti hoi ta sisa kasnong kong thong jongi kalami hakamap jongga tourism namar ngi don ya kilum kiwa ke betenat bat ha ju kapor kham tam e kabangi don ya gani ka jingrwa yobe kabadi ka kolsho kabala sendul da ki longshwa ki manswa jongi na du mendai thai bat kani klale ka USP nagam taban kring yaki babun ban wan jungok kai syagane snong bat kathan khala snong hi oi kendiat hakabe bat ka jingdon jong ka kam tourism hoi ka de ka badang thamai le selaban ong ka badang kumbasan ani hanyos nem kalya syakmat tendingi sutnat badaka jingyak telun lang jungi hagane ka industry nge I bakadon sibun ge ka balawan ra ya ka jingmentoi nagam ta ki no sosnong ke jungi handai klempoi perkhat daka jingwal ning shop jong ne klam jingpang COVID-19 house name ajar apobat house name bamenta lakta sisa hage babun kiliang namar ngim semlala ban penjai beje ke kam kumangi kepilenti kendi mungkin no sosno hadin bangilai sutu bangi hab banya kle bagi brio ke manabar ban ngis ngungu snyo brom ya ka soka kabala pensyai pen sutu lemaki head worker bangi de ban ai kata injection ani ban ai kata ketika ban jada tinrei kum kibrio ke im haginong kendong ngamla ban len ngidang sngap bat pediang ru ya sibun ki kana ham saya balong ka ke basosi hakaba tenteng ki pen ki khangla ya kibrio bakin ya shikmat nak dak injection handai particularly ngala ban ong hasnong gong thong ka jongi mangi sotu sai bangi hap ya kaban ya klelang bat kibrio ki banabar kum ki tourist bat ki we ki babun na keling jongki kala sim ya kena senjam hakaba ban ayak injection kum kalat panjada na kani ka kham jingpang handai nga sotu sai ba kani kam pat biang nama ngira don kamru ba baro ki snong jong ka thai ka snong kum ya kani ka penta wasdong ka jingwan jong kani ka kham kalakta ya ka kamai ka kaji ka jungi hoi ka jing im ka mamon ka sngi hatelun kumbakalong nama baro kin snong ki im ha ka jing ko ka jing ya handai ka yau ka hat kala khangla ka khayi pateng kala khangla kalai kawan kamlong ka pasna ni ki mangimi sa ba jo ka snong ngas ngoba simkia jo ka snoka kalat ka bakongsan kami kade tang ba ban aya ketika namba ninang gibasngan ban pediang banyak le bagi ke banaba bat hak jo kapor bang mi sa ba jo ka snong ninang gibasngan ya di banam don kanu kanu jingta so bat nak kita parano snong itu
Kedai bertan. Ti ngan sawan pat sashisin shapi barutel kam hadin. Nrei ngakwa ban wanra pat ya I kong dasumar majau but ngan kli jingkli I da pareng. Kong dasumar see you come from Tirna village, which is a place very near to the double-decker bridge in Nongriat. So we know that, since COVID has arrived, there is fear, and the fear is hovering not just only in the urban areas, but also in the rural areas. Can you still, can you share with us the ground reality, if rural tourism in the state is ready for this comeback of tourism, and there's the opening of homestays, guest house, resorts in your case, and all the allied services. What is the pulse of the people of Tirna and Nongriat and that cluster of villages?
Yes. Hi.
Kongatu?
Yeah, coming from
Yes.
Tuna. Yes. Can you hear me? Am I
Yes, we
audible?
can hear you loud and clear. Loud and clear, we can hear you. You can come in, yes.
Yes. So, my village Tuna. So, since of course we were being like badly hit with COVID since last year and this year as well, and but thankfully, during the course of like allowing like the tourism to open up, thankfully I would say the people in our village Tirna, and also staff involved with the resort, and especially like our caretaker and our kongs who are working with us, they have been, they have, they were like quite ready, and like to open up, since the month of July, August, they have started going to get themselves vaccinated, get themselves ready to open up tourism, to welcome guests in the village, in the resort. I used to have, like keep myself in touch with the people from Nongriat, Byron and all the other homestay owners from the area. So we keep on like in talking like with them and discussing, the possibility of opening up in our, our village Tirna and Nongriat. So when you, during the course of time, like people from our village, even I as the owner of Smoky Falls, there I didn't have to really, enforce, upon our own staff to go for vaccination or anything like that. They took upon themselves that they have the responsibility to go for vaccination, and they registered themselves for vaccination and got themselves. And surprisingly now, few of them, they are on their way for the second dose of vaccination. And thankfully, all of them were vaccinated before we open up, since 15th of September, they were all fully vaccinated. So that was how, people, because they the village Tirna, our village Tirna is fully dependent on tourism. We don't really have that much of agriculture like perspective, like to to have that agriculture, agriculture in our area is very, very, it doesn't we don't have that, that way of people like having their livelihood from agriculture or from any other field, in even if they are like carpenter skills, skilled youth, they have to move out from Tana to go to Sora to come to Shillong. So that was not like, they couldn't do that during those time. For them, like in our village, they'll have to look to tourism, and for them, they were like quite looking forward to tourism like openings in the village. Our kongs are working with us, and also when I went to the village, I didn't go there to ask them whether you vaccinated or not. Like they themselves,
Ah,
they said like, oh, we're vaccinated. Caretaker also was double
yes,
vaccinated, and then they also understand, the duty, the responsibility of
yes, yes, yes,
doing
Kunda
the
Sumar.
following protocol SOPs. And also
That's
from
very
Nongriat
good to
as well,
hear.
most of the homestay owners have been vaccinated, and also their staffs in Nongriat
Yes,
as well. So of course, like
that's very
Basoloman
good
was
to
saying
hear.
that a few of the yes, yes, some of the like village from Nongriat, the people from Nongriat village are yet to be vaccinated, but of course they are coming up for registration
Yes.
for to get themselves vaccinated. Yes.
Yes, I'll come back to you, Kongda Sumar, and but very pertinent point made there. You were talking about vaccine confidence and the natural response of people to the vaccine. Uh, I'm going to bring another guest, Manbha. He's a grassroots tourism stakeholder, and he's been in touch with people from Maukarnod, Norwed, and that area around the Punusla road. Further down. So, Manbha, we're talking about safety awareness and awareness among other allied services. You also own a guest house, so you are in touch with taxi drivers. You are in touch with shop owners and restaurant owners, tour operators, and other service providers. Now, we just want to have an understanding. Where do you think things stand right now as far as tourism and especially rural tourism is concerned? Mamanba?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Baki. Um, well, tourism as a whole, as Baki had just mentioned, is seeing an uptick in terms of footfall ever since tourism opened in our state in Meghalaya. Um, there is an expectation that tourism will continue to grow in terms of footfall as our state opens up, as our vaccination drives become more frequent, and as tourists from outside Meghalaya get more vaccinated as well. In terms of safety awareness, which is something I'd like to highlight here, is there's definitely a higher level of safety awareness now after the second wave compared to last year in December when we opened just after the first wave. And that is very key, really, in being able to sustain this tourism inflow of tourists, considering that it's very important for a large section of our population to have tourism opened from a livelihood security standpoint. And particularly with rural tourism, um, from the time that India went into lockdown in March of last year, I frankly feel that rural tourism was the most hit because of the business model that rural tourism operates. It's usually small ticket sizes of packages in terms of experiences, in terms of accommodation, and food, and the likes. And rural tourism definitely had to face the brunt of COVID-19 in a much harder way, I feel, compared to tourism in the urban scape. And when it comes to the allied sectors, well, tour operators, to be particular, and restaurants and tourist taxi drivers are definitely aware of the importance of being safe themselves and operating in a safe environment, which is why they have gone ahead and ensured that they're vaccinated, and are also ensuring that guests that come through them are vaccinated as well. And for guests who've not taken the second dose of the vaccination, that they come in with a RT-PCR report. However, the truth still exists that in some pockets, there are allied service providers like restaurants who are probably not really aware of the benefits of vaccination, and who responsibly, I would say, even stuck stickers on their restaurants of not having been vaccinated. And I really think this stems from the fact that there isn't really a clear picture about how the vaccine really works. And probably if there can be more messaging around how the vaccine works, that could really help overcome the hesitancy that surrounds the current vaccination
Yes.
that's being undertaken.
Yes.
But yes, I agree to Kong Majao's point where she mentioned that people are getting vaccinated out of a sense of responsibility. And I think
Yes.
that should be incentivized if possible, because it's really that characteristic of being responsible for each other, which
Yes.
will really firm up the foundations of us in Meghalaya being hosts, being
Yes.
hospitality service providers, and it's quite in the nature of us here in the
Yes.
Northeast of being warm and friendly people, so to say.
Yes.
So I think it can really add value to our attempt to welcome more tourists if we were to
Yes.
really showcase our sense of responsibility to safety,
Yes.
our sense of really valuing guest
Yes.
safety and ecosystem safety overall.
Yes. Yes, Vaman. A very pertinent point again there. What I gathered is actually cross responsibility, whether you're a tourist or you're a service provider. So that mutual respect and cross responsibility gaps are there. There's a lot of things to be done, but we hope that we get there soon. Um, we've reached the end of the first part of the panel discussion, and but before we go to the other side, I'd like to uh, just encourage people, if you have questions or support or help of any kind, if you need help of any kind, please call the toll-free number 14410. It's there on your screen. And we also encourage you to download the Behavior Change app. You will get all COVID-19 information there. And if you have completed your first dose, mark on your calendar the date for your second dose and get it done, okay, for the protection of yourself and the loved ones and the village and the town that you are in. So, yes, it's time that we slip into a quick break. We'll see you on the other side.
Hey Kongdeng, where to? Seems like somewhere special.
Yes, it's special. I am very proud to be a part of India's largest vaccination drive.
Are you not worried?
Why will I be? Instead, I should be worried if I'm not vaccinated.
But people are saying so many things.
People will always have something to say.
Will it really protect me from COVID?
Vaccination doesn't mean you are 100% COVID proof, but your immune system will be strong enough to fight even if you contract COVID-19 and it is not life-threatening.
I heard it has severe side effects.
There may be mild side effects like fever or chills or maybe headache, but that's normal. It will wear off on its own.
But is it really safe?
Of course, it is absolutely safe and backed up by medical professionals. Doctors, engineers, politicians, and many more are chosen from all sections of the society to be vaccinated.
Yes, you are right. I will also get vaccinated immediately.
Don't waste your time anymore listening to fake news and gossip. Take a decision to get vaccinated with confidence.
National Health Mission, Government of Meghalaya.
Kublai, atu pite bayu knyang jepang COVID khat khandai la ban penduk jan da manga wat mapi. Hoi, ringkat lang nila. Ali banga nan peni kumno. Hagano no gupor ba pijur ho ni senria kenma berbor ba pidai bandai la ka cintur da ka jan rumal. Kat bala yele ban perkhingil dia ban kta ila ki khman ka khmut bat ila ka cintur. Saj bhai ila ki jongki kti da ka sabon kumba arpau second AA. Penjangai iwe ni iwe bat da kenmau ban yeng jangai kumba nruput AA. Kebakong san e kadai ban dengi ki mas man la ka por. Kawai ka surgical mask, bat kawai ka mask jan nalor. Lada pidan gano ga jingpang kum ka jirho, kishit, pinhiar, thaitman kapor, shitom ban ring man siem, do akabor jingman, bat akabor jingsma. Phone, Shaki Health Center kibadan hajan jongpi, lani pilak ban call, yau ni toll free number, iwe sao, iwe not, namtai kino, hijing yarau. Yarau ingi, bangin yarau ipi.
National Health Mission, Government of Meghalaya.
Welcome back, each one of you, to this panel discussion, Paving Way to Recovery. For those who have just joined us, we've had a very purposeful conversation on how to ensure a safe environment as tourism in the state of Meghalaya starts reopening. Now let's probe further into what our panelists have to say. And I'd like to bring at this point Bar Solomon. Bar Solomon, given the complex situation of COVID, as we've discussed, and the ever-changing scenarios, what are the suggestions you can think of to protect the locals and the tourists alike? Of course, we're looking at Sora and we're looking at Khasi and Jainti Hills, but we're also looking at the state, pan Meghalaya. So over to you, Bar Solomon. I think just hold on there, Bar Solomon. I think we are trying to fix the microphone for you. You may need to repeat what you just said. Yes, go ahead, Bar Solomon. I think we can hear you now.
We will have to live with COVID. The only difficulty is that the strains of COVID, of the COVID virus, and the mutations that take place could pose a lot of problems for us as human beings to adapt and to essentially react to. However, it is possible that over time, the mutations of the virus will not be too hard for a human being who has been vaccinated. Better vaccines could arise in the future. There is no doubting that fact with the advancement of medical science. And we must remember that the COVID vaccine has been the fastest developed vaccine in the history of mankind. It has taken less than a year for the vaccine to go through the phases of testing, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and to be put into effect. And we have about 7 different types of vaccines that are being used worldwide. It just shows that the human being essentially is able to adapt to these very difficult conditions. However, we are all facing hardships and will have to live with them. Therefore, we will have to devise strategies in our interplay amongst these forces as stakeholders in the tourism industry, which essentially is a full contact industry amongst persons. It is a full contact in this way that essentially, besides people who look after the tidying up of rooms, of cleaning up of toilets, people who serve us food, people essentially who lay out our beds and make our bedspreads, people who drive us to and from the airport to the hotel and to our resorts and homestays. There is the full human interaction at all these levels. It is a very great interaction of forces. And therefore, as human beings, we have to essentially abide by the standard operating procedures that have been essentially laid down for all of us, not only for people in the industry, but for all human beings in the world. But the problem is essentially the standard operating procedures and protocols that have been developed essentially also undergo modifications with time. There will be a final resting of the modifications to these processes and these protocols once essentially the whole scenario of the pandemic stabilizes, and it will stabilize, as has been the case with other pandemics in the past. The only problem is that we should accept the parts of the present life and which says that it cannot be altered. We have to accept these changes that will occur to us emotionally and intellectually. In this way, we will gain the capacity for quiet, easy, and successful adjustment. Now, the whole process, the whole pandemic has essentially taught us a process of adjustments. Human beings are adjusting to the new scenarios that are evolving from day to day. But with time, essentially, I think so, with advocacy and with the vaccines becoming more efficient and more effective, we will overcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon. Very important and crucial points that you made there. The words have come out, our adaptability, and as we strategize, on how do we be intentional to adapt ourselves. And I'd like to, for the second time, bring Baming in. As someone said that COVID itself is a tourist because it travels around the world. And yet, just to follow on the question that I asked about Solomon, again, COVID is complex. So, Baming, can you think of strategic convergence, because there are so many partners and stakeholders at play, not just one segment. You've got health, education, tourism, and so on and so forth. So, can you think of a strategic convergence among stakeholders that could be, a protection model to bring about a protection culture? And in the words of the government, I think they call it COVID appropriate behavior. See, if you look at buildings, for example, our architecture perhaps has to change. COVID prepared hospitality sector, or COVID prepared building. What are your thoughts on this? Because Solomon just mentioned adaptability. So, are we moving in that direction? Are we thinking ahead? Just to hear you out, Baming.
Yeah, actually, quite a pertinent point that you brought in, Kit. I mean, I think this whole pandemic calls for, perhaps a kind of a relook and a readjustment towards how we address tourism going forward as well. And in a lot of ways, you mentioned, whether we have to look at the way we create our infrastructure in terms of hospitality going forward. And a lot of what you've said, I think it could be in sync with what Meghalaya tourism should look at going forward, which is like, alternative stays are now doing very, very well. I mean, that's really the new trend as far as tourism is concerned. People are looking for less crowded destinations. And in Meghalaya, we're lucky in a way that tourism has only developed in the last 10 years, practically. So places like Saura have started developing and seeing a tourism boom only in the last 5 years. I mean, this could have happened 30 years back. Now, if this tourism that we saw in Simla, the tourism that we've seen in Darjeeling, Nainital, in the last 40, 50 years had come to Saura 30 years back, today the whole of the Saura and the Cherpunji area would have become a monstrosity of, urban development. So luckily that hasn't happened. And hopefully, considering the fact that, we need to perhaps create, as you mentioned correctly, create as much space as possible. And that is really the USP of Meghalaya, nature. So in terms of the kind of way forward in terms of tourism hospitality, I personally feel that, yes, creating resorts, small resorts with, independent cottages or independent villas, setting up small homestays of about 4 to 5 to 7 rooms, creating open spaces is the way forward, rather than, huge congested concrete resorts, or resorts where you just have like 10, 15, 20 rooms within a very, very close vicinity. Because I think that in a way is kind of outdated now. And and so this is where we can perhaps sink in, COVID appropriate behavior, as you mentioned, or some amount of mechanisms of where we don't congest everyone within a very small area, with the way Meghalaya should be looking at tourism, which is totally based on nature and ecotourism, because Meghalaya's greatest strength is our nature. That's what we've got to protect. And it's because of our greenery and our nature that people are actually longing to come to Meghalaya. I mean, the metros of this country, the Gurgaons, the Delhis, the Bombays, where all the development is happening, they're longing to come to Meghalaya because of the greenery and the peace that we have here in terms of serene nature. So we need to work towards ensuring that our development is also, in a way, regulated. There is some amount of capacity exercise to be created in every village and every area, to know how much of, what is the kind of footfall capacity that each place can take, and work accordingly. So yes, I think this is a great time for the tourism stakeholders to converge. We have to understand that our strengths are our nature and culture, and that's why Meghalaya, is different from most destinations in the entire country. And we need to protect nature. We need to protect the greenery. We need to protect the open spaces, and learn how to balance tourism growth with, ensuring that we don't over infringe upon nature and congest our villages and our towns and our different areas. In fact, very interestingly, the Maulunong model is something that all tourism stakeholders should look at, because Maulunong was a village 15 years back that nobody knew till a small guest house was created. Today, it is at the peak of tourism. There are times where there are more visitors in the village than actual village inhabitants, which in a way is a slight bit of a concern. So we got to understand how to balance things, and ensure that we don't overcrowd our areas, we don't overcrowd our spaces, so that tourism will thrive, tourism will grow, and at the same time, we protect ourselves from future epidemics and pandemics.
Yes. Thank you, Baming. Great ideas, with responsibility and sustainable growth. You mentioned balance there. You mentioned alternative ecotourism. Gan poi pada menta sya iba rotel sasisen ngilai asngoni ba aming gumto ba rotel te hakajing perkat jonga kini ki wan lang but ki wan ra ru ya kata ka jingdon kam haba ka jingpet jonga ya ka jingya trailang te phila bani tho khandiar hakan no kom kini ki protocol jong ka tourism department laki don em nanta lese ka police department ka health bat kum ta ter hato nalor jeng kini hato nang don kam ya ka jingya trailang jong ki wei pat ki seng hapo snong hapo thau te piwan ni ki than khat ar snong ki baja ha ki snong ki jong pi to ki bangila ban ya penbot lem khnang ban ra ka jingya da ya ka jela ka jungi Marutel.
Kublai si sin part. Ngas nguba nakaleng ka soka ka le sibun ki ba batam nang prajongi. Tendai kumba ngelapan pau mene ba kum kina so snong ba im sikitai nong kendong. Ki ba ka jingnang jingtip kamde ka ba klan bat ka bala unjo kata ka kerdan ka bangin sutu daladi ladi. Tingas ngeu ba nalor kini ki protocol sana ki kendon. Ki ba ka soka meklia lembaga Department of Tourism, lembaga Department of Health, Police Department. Ngas ngeu ba lengba ka direction lan neka jingputa na ka soka. Ki dobas nong ki deki way. Ki bala ban lei kambha susu. Na ka ban tentu. Ya ki nong nong ki jongki bakin sim ya kan ka senjam. Ban jada dalade lengba ka injection. Hoi ngai ki seng phalang kum ki seng long mi ki seng samla bat kum juru ki ken hun niam lengba ka jing kai ka jongki ka jing pensulul ka jongki kan long ka wei ka borba ban yarap ya ka soka na ka pta ka jing sngan bat yada na ka khnyang jing pang COVID-19 tingas ngoba bangin susania atli ha ka soka ladang imdan ka jing kli nalade yalade kampat biang kamtam sakit thai nong kendong ke jongi ngas ngoba lengba ka jing puta lengba ka jing pen balengba ka direction ka ba kam klein na ka soka lengba ki clean ong sinsha kum ka district council ni ki sim watrai kan long ka borba ban kentu yakin dok snong sakit thai nong kendong ban sim ya kan ka benta khna ma kalong ka jing sngai dalade yalade namar kuma ka ong ka kentin ubleu yarap ya kitu ki bayarap irade ngas ngaban ong ba sakit thai nong kendong hi ngim pada don ke jing sutu hado kata kata nama teng ki don ki briu ki ba ngap bat pediang ya ki ham saya marki klet pat ya ki kubor ki balong ke basisha ngidon kam ya ke jing telang pasai sen pat ngasngo wa ka soka kan ai ka jing hikai ani ban educate yakin song snong lengba ki institution school bat ki dabasnong ki balong ki be im ringkat bat uwei no song snong agi tunong kendong jong
Kublai barutel ki dei ki jing ajing mot ki bangi haban ya perkhat biang sasisien ngakwa akan kapor ban kumban penbot ya jing kren jing barutel ya ikong dasumar ba in ai ngi kindiat jing shai da ni kren da tin khasi ngatrai ha ka resort ke jong pi ni ki jaka ki ba pi bo ki guest kila don ki guest ki bawan bansa hadin jong jing play biang ya kanika yakini ki tourism lat kamai da jing da limba jing jong kai perthei te jing kali kalong ba hoj phlai thu menne kum to kong da sumar ba ki staff jong fi ki rong ki bala kroi ban a ya ketika bat kum tar ter tenrei ki pade ki feedback kane ki jing sgo jing perkhat jong ki guest ki bawan ha to ka jaka phila ban thu khangiat ya ki jing shem jong pi ke ke ba ki yo ile si ki don ka jing ya pher apre jing i jong ki hang ni ha jala me khale ha jong resort jong pi ba ki ki state pi nga shukwa man so tho khandiat khnang ba kiwei ru ki la ban perthu bot lem ya ka e ka ba ka ba don ba ja hatrna
Ke Dakasi?
ha da khasi tidak ban kan ka pareng ru ka melai kam ka
Okay.
jing ngo I
So,
jong pi
hi. Ti ke e ke ba I ong I ba hotel hoi ya ka ba day. Ke e ke ba ngi hang thi haterna ke ba ngi lap nado bekiwan ki guest ken nado uni khatsan terik bengi peli. Kawe ke ba ngi senat kilong ba kini ki guest ki bawan banabar khantam ki banabar ken ko nabar cha kadot isiru. Kat kum kajing keli kajing ni yaki kalong ba kumnu kisngau haba kiwan rong shapo Meghalaya hapo Shillong hapo Cherrapunji haterna ke ik ba ki ong ki kalong ba ki sultanat kilap ya kajing pair but kisngau khoi kawai ru kadi ka mariang ba kalong ka ay ta ka leer ka badon ka ong ba ki yo bor ki sultanat haba kiwan chani ki yo ta ka jing sko khia ha kamet the moment bangi pili ya ka resort biang ti gadon bet ka kawan ken ka inflow of tourism ke bookings ki wan bet man kasni ti hang tung ilap ba ki brio ki long ki kwa ki man wan chakari gajongi and they like the way how things are being run in the resort community staff ki follow ki protocols how they wear their masks how they take care of the guests how they especially like the moment when they reached the resort our staff greeted them and also take down their numbers and follow protocols by checking their temperatures kita baru khoi ki bangi follow ki guest ki ken and ki smushngan ki baka ni ka resort ka follow ki protocols te ki long ki guest haba ki wan ki don kata jing smushngan ba ki dan hakatok environment baki staff dongi ki bre na shnong ki belong kilong aware ya kani ka jing pang bat ki take care ti hang tu kalap ba kini ki guest haba ki wan ki don ka jing sutanat but haba ki let phai ru ki let phai da ka jing sutanat ba ki smushngan baki mi nang neru kam dan ke jing kaman kata ya kubat ke jong ki ne baki la ban a shi ki weiru ka weiru kalong bangi ngi pet i bet bahang thi bangi la long fully vaccinated that is one thing ba ki guess haba ki one man visit yengi sha thi ki dan ka jing so shngan kata ka main factor hiru one of the main factors that
te enga sotanat baga jing kran jong pi ka yalamingi shaka jing snotho jong khasi bangi dei ban burom yakiwe but ni sotho naga jing kran jong pi ru ba ki guess ki bawan na shabar ka jalla jungi ki sngo shngan namar ki yo I ka jing khoj ya ka jing bot bet borinti ya kini ki protocols but inang kerman baka nang nong kumta te Kublishibon kong dasu now I'd like to bring again Manbha. By the way, I'd also like to just apprise the guests that at some point we are going to ask you to give a 1-minute comment. So you may want to think ahead and put your, your thoughts, gather your thoughts together for that. But the question to Manbha as of now, see, Manbha, we've seen how livelihood has been impacted. But we also know that, as the other panelists have said so, life must go on, tourism must go on. And with that comes security, right, and safety. So, we've also talked a lot on adaptabilities. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. What are the adaptability measures in cultural change that could happen and should be taken advantage of to navigate livelihood around tourism in Meghalaya? And I also invite other panelists, if they have something to add to what Manbha will respond, please feel free to do so. Manbha, over to you if you can respond to the question.
Sure, thanks, Market. That's a very interesting question. Well, I think I'd like to break this answer into maybe 3 focus areas in terms of a way forward for Meghalaya tourism. And just a second, Kamaja and Barming's views once again. I think yes, our strong point and Bar Hotel's view as well. Our strong point is our nature, is our pristine environment, and I think we should sustain that and really build a sustainable tourism model around that. And maybe if we were to bring in this concept of conservation, along with restoration, it could just work out wonders. Um, and this reminds me of an example of the Living Bridge Foundation and what they're doing in, in support of rural tourism and supported by Meghalaya Tourism. They're doing this initiative called Hands on Roots, where they are trekking down to where living root bridges exist in the Peninsula region as well as the Krashnong region and across the Khasi and Jaita Hills, really. And what they're doing is they are mobilizing local support to repair the living root bridges, to spread knowledge about the living root bridges. And that's one example of how we can look at maybe conservation and restoration together, marry them together to really build a sustainable tourism model, so to say. Because that is not just our USP, but it's really our survival platform, so to say. And the other focus area rather, that I can think of right now is mobility. I think mobility is very key for our tourism to go forward. And what I mean by mobility is connectivity, having the roads that lead to destinations, having roads that are wide enough and strong enough to handle the traffic of tourist inflow, and which is a challenge at the moment. But I'm sure with the right effort and the right initiative and intention, we'll get there. And in addition to the connectivity factor, I think it's very important that we look at mobility from a sustainable standpoint and have more electric vehicles on the roads. Could we have regulations around carbon emissions and reducing them, or maybe even taxing larger carbon footprint, so to say? Because if we would like to keep our greenery alive and growing, it's very important that we have enough rain as well. And if our air is not clean enough, rain could be reduced, in simple terms. And yeah, so mobility is very key for people to reach us, to see our beautiful attractions, our villages. And to be very particular here, I think like the Garo Hills, for example, has amazing hospitality. It's not just my personal point of view, but I've had several guests who've gone to the Garo Hills and spent enough time there to understand how amazing the hospitality of the people is over there. But the challenge in reaching the Garo Hills is roads, the absence of roads, or the absence of good roads, and also the deficiency in stay options. And the same goes with other regions of the state, apart from the East Khasi Hills district.
Yes. Yes.
And then third focus area I think like to highlight here is, the financial aspect of running a tourism business. There's a lot of cash burn that happens in the tourism industry, and it's just the nature of the industry. For example, for me, being a guest house owner, for example, there's sometimes very little control I have over how the guests use my plumbing equipment in the bathroom, and or how they use the room itself. And so there's always incurring expenditure in ways, forms that you usually would not really incur if the house is not a guest house or a resort, so to say.
Yes.
But that's just my point of view as a guest house owner. But even as a tour operator, even as a taxi driver or a restaurant owner, there is always this high potential for cash burn. And to address that, maybe I think it's important that we as tourism service providers, we start thinking about how we can be more disciplined and regimented around savings to be able to withstand another situation like a COVID-19 pandemic, and just to add to that, I feel that apart, it's it's also important that we look at diversification of our businesses. And one way I feel, one aspect of diversification which we service providers can adopt is storytelling through social media platforms, because social media is so powerful, and the fact that we, as being on ground service providers, we can really tell this sorry, a story about a certain place in the most original form, and it'll really be helpful for tourists to understand what an experience is like, to stay in a
Yes.
certain place, to visit a
Yes,
certain
Manbha.
place, to eat a certain dish, to
Yes.
be part of a dance performance or a song performance.
Yes. Yes,
It,
Manbha.
it's a lot more convincing for the tourist to be able to enjoy that if it comes from somebody who's local and who's
Yes.
really passionate about that culture and about the place and the experiences. And,
Yes.
and and it just really helps to be able to tell stories
Yes.
and showcase really what we're all about. So yeah,
Yes.
those
Thanks.
are my
Yeah.
three.
Thanks, Manbha.
Thank,
I think you made a very pertinent points there as well. Because of time, I'm sorry I've had to cut the panel discussion short. But yes, it has been a very insightful conversation to understand safety measures around reopening tourism in the state. Uh, Around the same question, if any one of you, I think we may have another 2-3 minutes. If any one of you would like to add to what Manbha had to say, so I would welcome any of the panelists. Bhaming?
Yeah, I think a lot of points have already been really covered. I think now from COVID situation, we're almost moving towards drafting the vision plan for Meghalaya tourism, which is perhaps what we should all look forward to. So yes, I think Manbha and all the co-panelists have really, really covered all the important points. And I'd just like to reiterate that point again, that, as tourism stakeholders, considering the fact that, having learned from this COVID pandemic and knowing that too much of congestion, too much of people living in closed spaces can be a big health kind of a threat as far as in the eventuality of pandemics and epidemics. Perhaps going forward in our vision towards building Meghalaya into a tourism destination, let us work side by side with nature. Perhaps both community and government can converge towards agreeing towards ensuring that if we have a certain size of land, that let's say whether it's 10,000 square feet, 30 or an acre, that we don't develop the entire space into a kind of a building or something.
Yeah.
Create gardens, create a lot of nature around it, and let
Yes.
us sell nature, because that is what that is what God has given us, and that is why Meghalaya is special. And we
Yes.
need to ensure that as we grow with tourism, we maintain and sustain our environment. And
Yes.
both environmental sustenance and tourism have to go hand in hand. If this happens,
Yes.
then I think we've safeguarded, the future for Meghalaya for the many hundreds of years to come forward. And in a way, it is also going to help us protect our population from any future eventualities, such as the
Yes.
COVID
Yes.
pandemic.
Yes, thank you, Bhaming. Now we've come to the end, and before we close, I would like to give you 1 minute each uh, to talk about and comment on give us a closing remarks. So I will start with Manbha, and Kong Dasumar will come in, and Barothel will come in as well, and after which Solomon will come in, and then Bhaming will end with his 1 minute of closing remarks. So Manbha, over to you.
Well, thank you, Doctor. Well, I'd just like to say that I think we as a people are very mindful about our well-being and about what we really value, which is our surroundings, our culture, and our identity. And I think there's a lot of positive optimism around that in us being able to showcase that and share that with the rest of the world. So yeah, I'm very confident about where Meghalaya and tourism industry in Meghalaya is going to be at.
Yes. Thank you, Manba. Kong Dasumar?
Yes. As stakeholder from Tirna village, we look forward to to better days in tourism, especially since we've been badly affected for the past 2 years, and we look forward, to work together at the grassroots level with the Darwashnong, with the village people, with our neighboring villages as well. So these are the things that we need to look forward to create an environment, a healthy environment where our tourists, our guests visit us, and they have a sense of feeling like safe when they visit our area, our resort, and when they go back with good memories, and like share like word of mouth to their friends and relatives all over India. And hopefully that one day in time soon, that the tourism in Meghalaya will be back to normal, and will be able to welcome more guests, and hopefully the economics and the financials that has really been affected during the past 2 years, we will recover and move forward to create a sustainable
Yes.
environment, sustainable tourism in Meghalaya.
Thank you. Thank you, Kong Dasumar. Barothel, i Jongpi Barothel.
Okay, thank you, Bagit. I think now it's time for me at least to share in English. So, as
Yes, Barothel.
one of the stakeholders of the rural tourism, our main objective and plan is that we want to control the inflow of tourists. Because our Baming said that if there is no control, I think we will destroy it by ourselves. So yes, particularly about Kong Tong, we have decided that it should not be like a tourist destination, but it should become like a heritage destination where only those people who really want to experience our culture, our scenic beauty, we come there. And because if we ask them more people to visit our village, they will not get and feel its essence, So that's why we need to accept according to our capacity so that our guests also will be satisfied of what they really expect while they're coming to visit our rural village or rural tourism or in whatever tourist destination. That is what means I feel like
Yes,
we should.
very wise words there, Barothel. Thank you very much. Bas Solomon, your 1 minute, Bas Solomon.
We are here and we all agree that we learn to like what we do. And that's why we are gathered and we are discussing this issue of the promotion of tourism. Now, this pandemic essentially is a learning curve for all of us, but I must essentially confess that the learning curve essentially has been stunted because the learning experiences have not been shared. We have to essentially, as a community of stakeholders in the tourism industry, learn to share our experiences to help build better models for the growth of tourism in our state. Just to stare you in the face, we stand 27th in the rankings among states as far as state domestic tourist visits, and we rank 28th as far as foreign tourist visits to the state as compared to other states in the country. This is a time and an opportunity for all of us to share our experiences, to pool in ideas and resources, to work out a lowest common multiple, and essentially develop a model so that we can regulate this industry by ourselves and essentially not depend or look on the outside for our learning process. I think so as a challenge. We should set a target of 1% of inflow of foreign tourist visits and domestic tourist visits to the state of Meghalaya by the year 2025-2026. That would be an achievement for all of us.
Very clear vision there. Paving, over to you for your 1 minute.
Part of my closing statement. But anyway, just to add further,
yes.
I think we can go with the concept that going forward, less is more. We can also look at, promoting the concept of health tourism and the fact that we can also make Meghalaya a kind of a center for organic agriculture, which is something that, again, I believe that healthcare begins with what we eat. And luckily, a lot of our rural areas are still protected from, pesticides and urea and all these things. So we need to conserve and promote organic agriculture. And most important of all, we receive an abundance of rain, and we need to now learn collectively into ensuring that we protect our rivers and streams from all the pollution that is happening. And, take this entire pandemic experience to, give us that sense of responsibility towards Mother Nature and understand that perhaps this is a wake-up call for humanity to introspect and learn to appreciate what nature and what we already endowed with, is something that is irreplaceable, and we need to work, towards safeguarding all these beautiful things that we have in our state.
Thank you very much, Paving. And on that note, I should say that we have learned so much on the subject from our esteemed panelists. And the words and ideas that will stick are the words like adaptability, balance, alternative eco, tourism, protection protocols, and livelihood through tourism, and that life must go on and tourism must go on. Less is more, in fact. And the last but not least is resilience. I'd like to thank our guests and panelists once again, Mr. Larsing Saoyan, Mr. E.R. Solomon, Barothel Khongsid, Mrs. Dasumarlin Majau, and Mr. Manbha Khongla. Thank you once again for sparing your time. And yes, I'd like to repeat, if there is a toll-free number that you can call if you need any help, and the toll-free number is 14410. For all COVID information, please download the Behavior Change app. And if you're vaccinated only once, just make sure you mark the date on your calendar where you complete your vaccination. The instructions are right there on the screen. And obviously the Behavior Change app, you will have all the information that you need. This panel discussion is brought to you by the National Health Mission, Government of Meghalaya. Until next time, goodbye and good night.
No, không em ta phi. Cam biang phi. Beliau. Pi so diau ba. Kadau kolong ba ngampat sim ketika ya dah COVID-19 teh. Kadau ki beliau ki semua atatian teh ban ki taksi zonga. Dia boleh pa pemilih sim eta encek eta. Kata ken kuat tambah masuk lumar jemut. Benlek eta ko online ter bas kuwi kolong bangamdan teh ko phone ko biang badan ning internet. Tips ya. Bagi sorka kalau sedang mana etika, kalau dan kaman berupa, bisulai bed, kadang tuang tu penyoy ka. Siapa? Ha, bisulai bed akan nukuno kecaka ain jack, akan nukuno si bagi ai, jengkat bagi ID jong pi, bagi penyoy ketika dana kelam COVID-19. Pemdan kaman ni lupa akan nukuno registration, yang sebenarnya ia ketu kecaka etika. Kata ti keluar baik kan yang itu kata, saya kena mau awak beli kerja. Nak kerja balik simno ketika ada mentah kesini. Mapipat, what I doubt you, simi ketika yada, klaim dapat sab issue ekapor.
National Health Mission, Government of Meghalaya.
The shadow came on us, took over our lives. But somehow now's the time we must unite.
Be bold, be brave, be still. In the end we shall heal, 'cause there's an answer, and together we will stand and fight. Lagi lojing dum ka klam kitap yani, ya kasha rak jinker menin kreman kasi.
Nhìn ya gled ki jing ya le but ki jing he. Ma jing du ai nhìn sa boy sha ka thong ka bangi be.
We will gather at the darkest hour, win this battle with faith and power. Long as we don't lose track of sight, together we shall see the light. No one can stop us, let's stay strong. The road to a better tomorrow won't be long. Katung mai bon ching che del gen sal sao on ching am tel gen tak rukang. Kuai no dingi verse kushia, na hogi koi pavandi milke rehna hai humko. Jaise ho koi family.
Okay, be bold and be brave and be strong and fight on, live on. It's not the end, it's a bend in the road. Let's move ahead, no stopping yet. Let's move ahead, let's not forget. Faith alone dries every tear, and when all hope seems lost, let's bow down in prayer. No matter who you believe in, there's no denying a blessing. Heal and recover, let's stand here united as one.
We will gather at the darkest hour, win this battle with faith and power. Long as we don't lose track of sight, together we shall see the light. No one can stop us, let's stay strong. The road to a better tomorrow won't be long.
Issued in public interest by National Health Mission Government of Meghalaya.